Do you know the song Copacabana? It tells the fate of Lola, Rico and Tony at the hottest spot north of Havana, where feathers, merengue, cha-cha-cha, and a mysterious single gunshot. Today's episode always makes me think of this song. Welcome to this episode of our new podcast series, What is Going Wrong and How to Put It Right, where we tell the story of how the farm-to-fork strategy was sabotaged. The farm-to-fork would establish the reduction of pesticide and fertiliser use and a significant increase in the area of farmland in the EU under organic production. In short, it would put the EU on the right path towards the future. Sound editing and musical creation by Gui Calegari. I'm Joana Louçã. What is going wrong and how to put it right. In 2020, in the wake of the mass mobilizations for climate by Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion and other movements, the EU proposed the European Green Deal. And it had an agricultural pillar, its name, Farm to Fork. It was a strategy meant to create an alternative vision for agriculture, making it more sustainable, safer for animals, communities and nature, cheaper and more adequate to the growing challenges of climate change. Considering what we know today of the subversion of the whole idea of the European Green Deal, the farm-to-fork component was the most sustainable proposal put forth, with the aim of increasing resiliency of Europe's food system facing the shocks that are already coming due to the environmental crisis. A key component of this strategy was connected to chemicals and pesticides, which are a monopoly of agribusiness giants like Bayer, BASF, Syngenta and Corteva. This monopoly, as well as the monopolies that these companies hold, like the seeds monopoly, guarantees that farmers and the whole food supply chain stays in the hands of big agribusiness that bend the whole sector to their will. Some key proposals of the farm-to-fork strategy were the reduction of pesticide use by 50% until 2030, the reduction of fertilizer use by 20%, and the tripling the area of farmland in the EU under organic production by 2030. This would put 1/4 of all the EU farmland under this mode of production. This groundbreaking initiative would put the EU on the right path towards the future. Yet, dark forces lurked. The implementation of farm-to-fork would evidently lead to a substantial loss of profits for pesticide corporations, and soon enough, these corporations deployed their lobby groups spearheaded by CropLife EU. The counterattack started. This was evidenced by the roller coaster of new lobby passes obtained by industry lobby groups and the spike in their spending. From 2020 to 2023, pro-pesticide lobby groups declared a total lobby budget of €70.8 million in the Transparency Register. In 2022, a European Citizens' Initiative signed by over 1 million people across Europe demanded ambitious pesticide reduction targets and the support of farmers to achieve it. It was aptly called Save the Bees and the Farmers. But the pesticide lobby used every lobby tactic to stall, undermine and derail the ideas and objectives underpinning the farm-to-fork strategy. Not in the least the pesticide reduction law, known as SUR, or Sustainable Use of Pesticide Regulation. We at Corporate Europe Observatory exposed the tactics used by these corporations and their lobbyists. I'll talk about 4 of them. Number 1. They pushed the narrative that the farm-to-fork targets would be a risk for the EU's food security and would harm food productivity when the opposite would likely be true. Number 2. They demanded that the Commission would carry out additional impact studies to delay the process as much as possible. Number 3. They ordered their own tailored impact studies from institutes, like the Dutch Wageningen Economic Research. These bogus studies were dismissed not only by scientists and NGOs, but by the EU institutions as well. They were biased by design, omitting from the get-go the obvious benefits of the farm to fork and the SUR. CropLife EU would launch their study, then Copa-Cogeca would present their own, in several corporate-sponsored media events in succession, aimed at creating a media frenzy and an echo chamber effect that would reach all the way up to the Commission's corridors and meeting rooms. Number 4. The industry and its lobby army further pressured national governments and, via their agriculture ministers, eventually forced the EU Commission to start a whole new additional impact study that would delay the process by at least 6 months. In the meantime, 6,000 scientists expressed their support for SUR, another component of the farm to fork called the Nature Restoration Law, as not only being possible but essential for food security in the long term in the European Union. I have mentioned one very important actor, Copa-Cogeca. I will talk about it in the break. But for now, it's important to mention that the pesticide industry worked in strict collaboration with it. This was a key factor in alliance with the far-right think tanks on what was to come ahead. In November 2023, 3 long years after its proposal, there was a plenary vote in the European Parliament. Amendments from the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's own European People's Party and the far-right political groups weakened the pesticide reduction law so much that it became impossible for even the members of the European Parliament who supported the pesticide reduction to vote in favor of it. It was voted down, but the worst was still to come. In early 2024, the far-right, aligned with the EPP and the agribusiness lobbyists, piggybacked the growing farmers' protests about dwindling revenues to get the EU to roll back any farm-to-fork proposals and go even further and destroy previously existing common agricultural policy, green measures that benefited biodiversity. Right-wing forces, industry lobbies and Copa-Cogeca then colluded to push for the scrapping or delay of many farm-to-fork and Green Deal promises. This included a promised export ban on chemicals and pesticides that are already banned in the EU, but are still being produced and exported to other countries. For this, the Commission started an urgency procedure that only takes 1 month. Of course, this time the industry, CropLife and Copa-Cogeca did not ask for any impact studies. And soon, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the definite withdrawal of the pesticide reduction law. Let's have a little break. We have been talking about Copa-Cogeca, but who or what are they? This, as you might have guessed, is where the song Copacabana enters. I've drafted several very funny verses to subvertise this song and linking it to Copa-Cogeca, but my complete inability to sing has prevented me from ever doing anything with it. Anyway, I'm losing track here. What is Copa-Cogeca? Copa-Cogeca presents itself as the representation of millions of farmers and thousands of agri-cooperatives. Yet, more often than not, its key interests and lobbying positions can actually clash with farmers' interests. It is one of the oldest lobby groups around, and it enjoys enormous and privileged access to the EU institutions. Copa-Cogeca is, as the name suggests, a twin organization. Copa represents the farmers, Cogeca the agri-cooperatives. Copa was set up in 1958 and Cogeca in 1959. A few years later, the two organizations merged. The agri-cooperatives were originally farmer-owned processing and trading companies, as well as financial service providers. They were supposed to support farmers by defending their collective interests. However, the largest of them have now turned into multinationals themselves, such as Friesland Campina or Rabobank, whose interests often clash with those of farmers. But is there no alternative for farmers? There is. There always is. Farmer unions with diverging visions have attracted many new members across Europe. For instance, the European coordination of Via Campesina unites organizations of small and medium-sized farmers who strive for food sovereignty, market regulation, and agroecology. But let's get back to Copa Cogeca. For decades, the European People's Party and Copa Cogeca have molded EU agri-policy to the interest of big agribusiness. They have focused on the enlargement of scale, and their policy has led to the disappearance of over 5 million farms in 15 years. The Common Agricultural Policy, known as CAP, is the biggest financial package of the entire European Union. Has been skewed towards big landowners and big agribusiness companies since its inception, creating the unsustainable agricultural model that sacrifices farmers to the interests of companies such as Bayer, BASF, Syngenta or Corteva. 80% of all the farm subsidies from the CAP are given to 20% of the biggest farmers. Copa Cogeca has always lobbied to keep this unjust system in place, cooperating with the pesticide industry to hinder any proposal that touches an inch of big landowners and big agribusiness. This creates not only a burden to farmers, but also to society. The far right aligned with the EPP, Copa Cogeca and big agribusiness, and has strived to push farmers' associations towards a narrative which is completely antagonic to their interest. Matthias Corvinus Collegium, the Hungarian-funded think tank commonly known as MCC, which reports directly to Viktor Orbán, has pushed certain farmers' groups into an ever more outlandish political positions. The most outspoken organizations thus far have been the Farmers' Defense Force from the Netherlands, the Plataforma 6F from Spain, the Coordination Nationale from France, and the Landschaftverbindung. Their connections to far-right parties, namely Belang van Nederland, Vox, Rassemblement National, and the AFD, as well as NDP neo-Nazis, are known. Let's get back to our story.
Lobby.
Lobby. Lobby.
Lobby.
Lobby.
There is a fundamental conflict between ultra-neoliberals and the nationalist far-right that complains about globalists while forming conservative alliances and cozying up to them as soon as they get a chance. And the story is told as if the right wing, the far right, and big agribusiness hadn't been on the side of this catastrophic neoliberal agricultural model since its inception. More, it is presented as if they had any alternative to it, which they don't. Copa Cogeca, CropLife, the EPP, IDE, ECR, Bayer, BASF, Corteva, and Syngenta have only one plan: radical deregulation and free trade, the complete opposite of farmers' interests. They use the farmers' protests to sabotage the farm-to-fork strategy and simply go back to business as usual. Yet there is no going back. Farmers will growingly be exposed to the worst scenarios of climate change, through extreme weather and collapsing crops. Only an alternative model of agriculture in favor of farmers' livelihoods instead of big agribusiness profits will be able to achieve that. It is not only time for a change is coming, whether they like it or not. The pesticide industry's hefty financial lobby firepower and political reach will continue to undermine public interest decision-making, and growingly more so in its costly alliance with the ultra-right. To speed up action on the pollution crisis, it's time to raise a lobby firewall to protect decision-makers from the poisonous influence of the pesticide industry. In short, it is time for toxic-free politics. We have come to the end of our episode. Please share it, rate it, and send us a message with your feedback. Research by Nina Holland. Script by João Camargo and myself. Sound design and editing by Gui Calegari. Graphic design by José Torres. I'm Joana Louçã. And this was Corporate Europe Observatory's What is Going Wrong and How to Put It Right.